Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rebecca Luber, and I'm the Director of Career and Business Engagements with the University of Minnesota Alumni Association. Thank you so much today for your interest and participation in our webinar, Making the Most of Employment Gaps. Today, we want to also thank our members and donors of the Alumni Association for powering our alumni webinar series. We appreciate your support. To learn more, you may go to umnalumni.org/membership. We have some upcoming webinars that you may also be interested in listed on your slide here today, such as hot housing trends, so looking at real estate trends. On April 15th, we also have a webinar on the workplace and parenting. And then on May 13th, we have a webinar on how to be the MVP of your career change. And that information can be found at umnalumni.org/virtual. We're also proud to announce our Women in Power series, which is in partnership with the Women's Center at the University of Minnesota. This series will be focused on looking at the gender pay gap, advocating for yourself, salary negotiation, and asking for a raise. Registration ends March 24th, and to learn more, you may go to the link listed on your screen, which I'll also share out after today. Just a few housekeeping notes. If you're interested in listening in by phone, you may do so by dialing the number on your screen at 646-558-8658, and then dialing the webinar ID, which is also listed on your screen as 980-5509-0890. Today, you may ask your questions at any time throughout the webinar, but we will reserve time at the end to answer those questions. If you like to ask questions, you may do so by entering them into the Q&A box that you see at the bottom of your participant bar. All right. And without further ado, I'd like to begin having Hallie Crawford, a certified career coach and founder of Create Your Career Path Career Coaching, kindly introduce herself. Oh, your volume.
Thanks everyone for being here today. And thanks Rebecca for that introduction and all of the admin information too. I feel like I need to attend the parenting and working from home one because it's just, it's crazy. So I'm Hallie Crawford. I'm a certified career coach and speaker and author. Our company is based in Atlanta, Georgia. So it's actually pretty sunny here today and we have no snow. Feeling very lucky for that at the moment. And I have been coaching and training for just over 21 years now. I have an undergraduate degree from Vanderbilt University and a graduate degree from the University of Illinois, and lived in Chicago for a long time. So I am very familiar with the winters up there, probably at least close to Minnesota. So we are going to be talking about making the most of unemployment gaps today and how to deal with, obviously, because so many people are in this situation due to COVID, have been furloughed or laid off. And even before COVID happened, it's always kind of confusing for people to know a couple of things, you know, how they deal with this on their resume and on their LinkedIn profile. And then also, what should we be doing during this time to kind of leverage our time wisely for that next step in our career? And I will go ahead and share my screen now. So bear one second with me. Make sure we've got this going. Okay, good. All right, wonderful. So let's dive in first. You know, I kind of talked about already, you know, job searching and related to COVID. We'll talk about these things for just a second, and I'll show you our agenda in a moment here. So here's the deal. Job searching in normal times can be totally overwhelming for people. Most job seekers are stressed out about it. I don't think that we've had any client come to us ever and say, I love job searching. Like, this is one of my favorite things to do. I'm really excited about it. It's not our favorite thing to do, and it's stressful in normal times without everything else that's going on. So then you layer on to that COVID-19, and understandably, people have a hard time understanding, what they need to do about their job search. Like our clients are telling us they don't feel like they should be networking as much because they're bothering people when they have all this other stuff going on. We also have our clients telling us that, because they feel so isolated, they're just less motivated about everything, much less their job search. Job seekers are uncertain how to handle their search, even in normal times. And it can feel more difficult to really maintain connections in an effective way due to COVID-19 too, because again, we don't have this in-person networking. The good news is that there are a lot of new technologies, et cetera. And I know that your alumni association is providing a lot of virtual networking events and all of that, which is fantastic. So what we wanted to tell you is the good news is that you don't have to be this person that is, isolated and struggling and having trouble. You can use this energy that you've got in a more positive way. So we want you to think about, kind of from a big picture perspective for today, we want you to think about how you can use your time and energy, and maybe if there's, frustration or whatever it is, to kind of channel that in a different direction, to channel that energy that you have in a more positive and productive way for networking, etc. Okay. For people who are searching for a new job, especially if you've been furloughed or laid off, whether you're searching for a brand new job or just a side gig to kind of make ends meet, everything that we're talking about today will be relevant to your situation, just by the way. And even if you expect, to go back to work in person, when there's job instability, regardless of what's going on with your company or industry or organization, we always want people to focus on their career advancement and their next steps, planning for the future and networking. Because again, just like a recession, if COVID has taught us anything, it's that we don't know what's going to happen and what might come our way. So we don't want people to be fearful at all, but we want them to very much be like the CEO of their career and make sure that they're being very proactive about always staying challenged, looking towards that next promotion or the next step that you want to take, and having a really good, solid strategic career plan so that you're ready to go kind of no matter what happens. So let's look at our agenda for today. So first of all, we want to talk about how to identify and be clear about what your goals are for your next step in your job search specifically, and identifying your brand. That's the first thing we want you to be thinking about in order to make the most of these gaps. Number two is we want you to revise your resume and LinkedIn, and we'll talk with you about how to do that. Number three is we want you to think about how can I leverage this time that I'm having right now, if you're furloughed or laid off, for example, or even if you're not, to really focus on my own professional development so that I'm ready for that next step, whatever it is. Number four is we want you to start networking and kind of getting out there. Just because COVID is going on does not mean that you should stop networking. You just kind of need to handle it like it would be holiday time, so to speak, where people may be a little bit busier and less likely to get back to you right away and need a little bit more time to respond to you. But honestly, we're all kind of getting used to, in some way, shape, or form, and have adjusted to this new normal. So getting back kind of full force with networking, we would highly recommend that. And then tip number five, or step number five, would be, as part of your networking efforts, we really want you to be conducting informational interviews on a regular basis so that you can secure that next position, get that next promotion, whatever it is that your next step needs to be. Just really quickly, this webinar is being recorded, but if anyone would like a copy of the presentation, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd be happy to share that with you. You would just email us at admin@halliecrawford.com, the email address on this screen. Happy to send that to you. Let's talk first about step number one. So the first thing that we want you to do is to think about, and honestly, we would say this for anyone, whether they're, in career transition, or if they're just kind of refreshing their strategic career plan, or whether they're looking for a new job. We always want our clients to be looking at, okay, what are your career goals? What's kind of your 5-year plan? And work backwards from that to know what your, 1 year, 3-year, 5-year plan is, and check in on that quarterly. So again, you're moving forward in the direction that you want to. So our first kind of question here, and this would obviously be an assumption that most people are in kind of job search mode who are here today. But our first question for our first poll is, how clear is your direction? How clear are you on what jobs you want to be applying for, what promotion you want to get on your next step, basically. So if you could answer our first poll here right out of the box, we're getting the engagement going, that would be great. And thanks, Rebecca, for launching it. All right, cool. And I'm going to have the chat box open too. If we do get any questions in the chat box at all, kind of as we go, I'd be happy to try to answer those, throughout the program as well. So feel free to put those in there a little bit too. Okay, good. So we've got 71%. My search is not focused enough, which understandably could be a big part of why you're here. And then 29% say that their search is targeted and focused. So thank you all for sharing that. That gives me a sense of kind of the demographic, so to speak. One of the things that I did want to say to everyone, and let me go ahead and move to this next slide here, is that we realize, especially if you're unemployed right now, we realize that you may not want to have such a targeted search that you're only looking for, this one type of job, because you need to get something right away. So you may be feeling like you want to cast your net a little bit wider. And we always tell our clients that's okay to do so. It's okay to have, 2 or 3 possible types of jobs that you're going for, or 2 or 3 possible directions. We don't see any harm in that. We don't want you to have more than like 2 or 3 though, because then you start to get scattered. We would recommend that you think outside the box in terms of your target jobs in this way that is listed on this slide right here. So if you're trying to think about, okay, what are some alternative kind of job titles that I could be looking at or pursuing, or different types of jobs, we want you to do a little bit of kind of brainstorming and thinking outside the box. And it would be a great idea for you to brainstorm with friends, with family members, with coworkers, or former coworkers, a coach like us. But here are some ideas on this slide. So if you're trying to think outside the box in terms of what are some other target jobs I could go for, you could think about like vendors to your previous industry or your current industry. People that would have served your industry that you may already have connections with or not, but that could be something that's related to what you've done in the past. It could be related industries. So for example, if you worked in, let's just say, counseling, you could be looking at keywords online on job boards for things like mentoring, training and development. You could be looking at internal counseling, like within HR of an organization versus, counseling as a consultant or something like that. So look at and consider related industries. And one of the ways you can do that is by plugging in different keywords that are relevant to your previous position on job boards to see what else comes up. You could also look at competitors to your previous organization. You could consider working inside for example, like inside sales versus outside sales, or consulting, for example, like one of our clients who worked at Bain for many years, she, instead of doing outside consulting, moved to work in-house at Cox Communication, doing business strategy for them. And then also, finally, the last one on this slide here is to consider and think about what your transferable skills are, because those could help you brainstorm alternative ideas as well. And it's a really good idea, by the way, for this step, to have someone else like go through your resume with you, even just for 10 or 15 minutes. It doesn't have to take that long, and help you pick out what some of your transferable skills and experiences could be that could either relate to another industry or another type of job and job title. As part of step number 1, identifying and clarifying your goal and narrowing things down, it's a really good idea to use our career model. So the item or the model on the slide here is the model that we use with all of our clients to help them evaluate whether their career path is on the right track, to plan for where they want to go next, and also to determine what they want their next step to be, or define the right career fit, if you will, the right job. And the way that you can use this for goal setting, I'll walk you through this just briefly for a moment, because you can use this model as a checklist for yourself. And it will help you brainstorm alternative ideas, but also it can help you evaluate the ideas that you're considering and looking at, whether they're going to be a good fit for you or not. So basically, on the screen here with this model are the 8 things that you need to consider in order to know if a career path or a job is the right fit for you. You want to think about what would be, or if the job you're evaluating would be fulfilling and rewarding to you in some way, shape, or form. Would the job align with your values? And if you're brainstorming different ideas, what are the tasks that you've performed or projects that you've worked on in the past that have been the most rewarding for you? That could give you some ideas about things to pursue next. With the enjoyment piece going to the left here, you want to consider and look at, what are my most enjoyable tasks? So if I look at the history of my career, what are the tasks that I've performed that have been the most enjoyable and rewarding for me over time? And then look at your strengths, again, going to the left. And it's really, really important when you're brainstorming alternative ideas, but also in order to sell yourself effectively for branding purposes, what are my top 5 strengths and how do I want to leverage them in the right way in this next position? So you can also write down and interview other people about your top 5 strengths, ask them what they see you do really well. You could take the Strengths Finder assessment or an assessment like that to help you clarify, okay, what are my strengths? That can help you narrow down your goal as well. Then you want to take a look at education and experience. What else would you be qualified for based on your education at Minnesota, but also your past experience as well? What would be relevant or could be relevant? And then finally, you want to think about your personality type. What's the right fit for you in terms of whether, for example, you're introverted or extroverted, whether you're more a big picture strategic thinker, or if you're more detail oriented, for example, and how your personality type would relate to or be a fit for what's the right work environment for you. What type of organization do you want to work at? A large one or small one, a startup or much more well-established? Is it a place that should be more creative or a little bit more traditional for you? And then finally, obviously, a critical piece to knowing what your career goal is your compensation. What's the compensation, including the benefits package, that you want to target and have? What's the ideal for you? In order to help you brainstorm different target jobs, so similar to what we were saying on the previous slide here, there are some really good websites that we would recommend for you that will help you brainstorm different ideas and kind of see what else is out there. myplan.com is a very good one. When you go to myplan.com, just FYI, everyone, it is geared, or it was originally kind of launched for more recent college grads, but don't let that deter you, because it's very relevant and useful for even more seasoned professionals like me. So I can say that because I'm 48, I feel like I fall in the seasoned category by this point. The other website that's good is onetcenter.org and bls.gov as well. These are good kind of career brainstorming websites. And then finally, we would recommend, as I said earlier, plugging in some of your keywords and some of your strengths and, top enjoyable tasks, etc., into websites or job boards, I should say, like glassdoor.com and LinkedIn. That can help you brainstorm additional ideas too. Now, when you're thinking about your brand, so as part of your goal setting, once you start to target 2 or 3 paths, or even one that you want to pursue, when you're thinking about your brand next, this is part of selling yourself, obviously. Some of the things that we want you to incorporate into what we would call your branding statement that you would then use on your About section, on your LinkedIn profile, and your summary of qualifications at the top of your resume. You want to include and think about what your values and passions and interests are, why you enjoy the work that you want to be doing next. What are you passionate about related to that industry? You also want to think about why you're qualified, as we said earlier, strengths, education, and experience. But also think about your personality type, everyone, and what are some of your soft skills, because that leads to your brand as well. When we talk about personality type and soft skills, going back to the career model, you want to think about all of these pieces again, primarily the fulfillment, the strengths, education, experience, and personality type. But your soft skills could be something, things like I'm great at, being a leader and a natural leader of a team. I'm great at mediating conflict or change management. Some of those other things that employers can't necessarily teach you, you just either kind of have or you don't. But you want to make sure that you incorporate that into your brand so that you're showing them and demonstrating to them what your unique selling points are. And what we mean by this is we want you to think about how you stand out from the crowd as it would relate to your peers and your competition going for those same jobs. What unique combination of education, experience, and strengths do you bring to the table, and overlay personality type with that as well, so that you can understand, the top two things that are unique about me are this within my industry. And then finally, a couple more things about your brand, and then we'll get to step number 2, is when you're thinking about or when you're working on your brand, part of this is you want to check your online presence. Our clients tend to forget about this one most frequently, so we always want to remind people of it. There are too many employers out there, or people who have been turned down by employers because of something that's been found online. So we would recommend Googling yourself once a quarter, give or take, just to make sure that everything that's out there online is kosher and okay by you. You want to review your Facebook, your Pinterest, anything else, and also obviously review and kind of clean up LinkedIn as appropriate. Every once in a while, someone has the same name, for example, on their resume as someone else who may have not so great past. And so we have had clients, for example, search for their name online, and they decide, for example, to start using their middle initial or their middle name, just so they differentiate themselves from, if someone searched for their name online, they might not find something that they wanted them to, or that wouldn't be as appealing. You know what I mean? All right, so let's talk about the last piece of step number 1, and this is branding. So as part of working on and identifying what your brand is, we want you to finally create from your branding statement what your elevator speech would be, because you're going to actually use this. Even though we're not doing in-person networking either at all or as much, you still need your elevator speech when you're talking with someone in an informational interview, as an introduction in an email to someone when you're wanting to network with them or connect with them, and even on virtual networking events. So your elevator speech is something you want to have at the ready. You can use it for a lot of different purposes. And your elevator speech should cover all of the points on this slide. It needs to be about the value and the results that you provide to prospective employers and to your clients. You want to adjust your elevator speech for whatever your new roles, what you want them to be. And by the way, when you're thinking about your branding statement and trying to decide kind of what keywords you could use, etc., I would definitely take a look at other people on LinkedIn who are in the roles that you would like to be in, to get some ideas from their LinkedIn profile. How are they positioning themselves? What image do they have behind their headshot, for example, to get some ideas about things that you can include on your profile and on your resume. So this leads us right into step number 2, and this is obviously upgrading your resume in LinkedIn. We want you to make sure that these are in tip-top shape, because they are such a big deal. LinkedIn is no longer an option. It's a critical piece to your search. And all of your materials, your cover letter, LinkedIn, and resume should all kind of match and represent you effectively and communicate your brand effectively. You want to make sure just a couple of things, because these are kind of basics. You want to make sure that you're checking the formatting of your resume, make sure there's enough white space, make sure that there's a header on your resume that you also have on your cover letter as well. Make sure you include keywords on your resume and on your LinkedIn profile too, so people who are searching for people like you will find you easily. And keywords on your resume are important to get past the ATS scanners. And make sure that you have a summary of qualifications at the top of your resume and that you mention marketable results each time. This is an example header of a resume from one of our clients. And I just wanted to share this with you because resumes are much more fancy and prettier these days, and you want to make sure yours looks contemporary and have your name be your brand. One of the things I wanted to point out from here is not only do you have your LinkedIn profile, but two other things. It's a great idea to have a quick summary statement about who you are as a professional and what you bring to the table, and also some keywords at the top here. It doesn't have to be this fancy, but if you at least have these two elements that I'm pointing to on the slide right now, that will help you stand out from the crowd and help market you, even if you've got some unemployment and you've got some gaps on your resume. So let's get to that specific topic right now for a moment here, related to if you have possible gaps. So in your employment history, just by the way, it is okay to mention these days that you were laid off or furloughed due to COVID inside of your experience section of your resume. And you can also mention this on your cover letter. That's acceptable to do because we're all in the same boat. Employers understand that this has happened to a lot of people. And also what you can do, so here's what I mean by this is two things. Number one, you can put a section for, COVID experience or what you've been doing during the time of COVID when you were furloughed or laid off, classes that you've taken, volunteer work that you've performed, whatever it is, okay? And you can also reference if a project was incomplete or if you were laid off of a specific job, you can write what we wrote here at the very bottom here in blue, what happened as a result of COVID, okay? So after highlighting a marketable result in a specific position, the last one that you had, you can mention what happened as a result of COVID so that they understand that's kind of helping you explain why that gap is there and not just having kind of the hole in your resume, so to speak. If you have not done a lot of any of these items on the next slide yet, it would be a great idea to start working on filling the gap a little bit, taking a couple of classes, even if they're free or one time. LinkedIn Learning and Coursera.org are the places we recommend. Is it a good idea for you to get a certification because you're trying to transfer into a different industry, for example? I'm sorry about that, guys. Hold on. Is it a good idea for you to get a certification, even if it will help you get that next job or get that next promotion? So consider those things. And then we did want to mention, by the way, too, volunteering and part-time jobs. And then I'll talk with you about the testimonials too. But we wanted to mention volunteering and part-time work for two reasons, because we've actually had clients volunteer remotely. So obviously it has to be a certain kind of volunteering to be able to do that. But if you take a look at websites like volunteermatch.org and idealist.org, there may be some ways that you could leverage your strengths and skills in a different way remotely. And we had a client, for example, do this. She was in Atlanta. She did some Google Analytics and website work for a nonprofit out of California. And it was great because she was able to put that on her resume, but she also got a reference and testimonial from the group leader, as well as a testimonial and reference from the organization where she worked. Or the projects that she worked on for that nonprofit. It was also a really good networking opportunity for her to make some new connections. And some of you may consider part-time work or freelance work to kind of, again, fill your time, but also add something to your resume. And there are lots of websites out there like flexjobs.com and remote.co. Those are the two good ones that we like the most, that are only for working remotely or flexible work, okay? And once you get, by the way, testimonials from any of this work that you've done, or from a volunteer group leader, or the teacher of a certain class that you took, you can actually add some testimonials as another way to fill some of the gap in your resume space-wise. We have had our clients add excerpts of testimonials from their previous employer, or whoever has written a reference or testimonial for you on LinkedIn. You can put some of those excerpts on your resume as not just a way to fill the gap, but it's a third-party endorsement. It can be really, really helpful to help sell you. Okay. So as part of revising your resume, when you're trying to kind of, I'm just going to say hide or cover up the unemployment gaps. One of the other things you can do in terms of how you format and lay out your resume is you can use a hybrid of what we would call functional and chronological resume. So under your summary statement at the very top of your resume, which would be your summary of qualifications, that is usually a 2 or 3 sentence kind of paragraph about why you're qualified for that job. In addition to that, underneath your summary, what you could do is have functional areas of strengths and expertise that would be relevant for the jobs that you're looking for now and you're applying to now. And you can group them under certain keywords like business strategy or project management, like the examples here, okay? And after each of those keywords, put down what some of your strengths are. That will help you kind of fill that gap a little bit, but also show them right up front in a more robust way than just having your summary, what some of your core strengths are and what you bring to the table related to those core strengths. So consider revising and laying out your resume in a little bit different way that can help you kind of fill in those gaps. Let's talk about step number 2, or as part of step number 2, I should say, revising your LinkedIn profile. So you also obviously need to make sure your profile is not just up to date, but that you have the same kind of thing, that you put something in there about what you've been doing during this time of COVID. Remember, just in general with your LinkedIn profile, your about section at the top can be more personal. You can use first person, and all of the rest of the items on this slide here are kind of some of the basics. You want to make sure your photo is professional. You have measurable results under each of your experience section. Make sure that you've got keywords that people would search for to find you, so that recruiters and employers will start to find you on LinkedIn. Our clients that we've worked with on their resume and LinkedIn, we help them identify these keywords so that their profile is search engine optimized, so that employers and recruiters are contacting them to set up interviews. And then you want to make sure that you check your settings on LinkedIn, make sure your complete and whole profile is completely public, and that also that you have that button and setting turned on, that you're open to new opportunities. I wanted to show this profile with you just briefly. This is a profile that our LinkedIn expert created for one of our clients. She does this all day long. It's fantastic. But people are now, just as a heads up, behind their headshot, they are now creating branded banners and images behind their headshot. And we would highly recommend you all work on this, because it will help sell you enormously. It just looks great. You know, when you go to it, you know exactly who she is, and you know the value she provides. If anyone would like more information about how we can create a branded banner like that for you and help search engine optimize your profile, as well as the other kind of little tips and tricks that you need for your LinkedIn profile, happy to talk with you about that. You can just email us at admin@halliecrawford.com, and we'll explain to you how all of that works and the different price points for the different packages there. So LinkedIn is really, really critical, and we want you to continue networking with people even during this time. Let's talk about step number 3 now, and this is focusing during this time on your professional development and what you could be doing to kind of enhance your skill set, if you will. We talked already about coursework, and we'll do our second poll here in just a second, Rebecca, if we could. But you want to think about what classes could or should I be taking to enhance my qualifications? What would be the ones that would be the most valued and the most relevant? Ask your former boss or colleagues about this. Check out certifications through your industry association. Things that you might find professors from Minnesota on Coursera.org too. So to get ideas about what you could do to enhance your skill set, the other thing you could do too is research other people's LinkedIn profiles to see what kind of qualifications and background they have. And another great way to leverage your alumni association, and let's go ahead and launch this next poll, Rebecca, if we could, that'd be great, is to conduct informational interviews with fellow alumni to find out any just generic job search tips, but also classes that they may have taken or things that they have done to kind of stand out from the crowd and get to that next level in their career development. So with this next poll, we're wondering who's taken an online course for professional development. This number has obviously gone up a lot higher than it used to be pre-COVID. And I think that's a good thing. It gives us access to a lot more. All right, so far we've got more people have not. Okay, great. Thanks for sharing the results, Rebecca. So 56% say no, they haven't, and 44% say yes, they have. That number is a lot higher than it used to be for the yeses. We would definitely recommend this, even if it's just, like we said, a one-time free course. LinkedIn Learning is just very robust and fantastic. And we would highly recommend doing that in part because it will help you feel more confident about your next steps as well, and putting something on your resume to help you feel a little bit more confident about, okay, what you've been doing during this time too. And it keeps you busy, gives you something to do. As you're thinking about professional development, one of the other things we want you to do too is make a more concerted effort to show off your expertise and strengths by sharing or publishing articles on LinkedIn, by participating more actively than you have before in LinkedIn groups. This is great for networking too. To share your Strengths Finder or any other career assessment results that you've taken on your LinkedIn profile. Write an article for an industry blog or newsletter. And we would highly recommend too, another way to kind of help you overcome, if you will, those unemployment gaps could be also to create like an online resume and profile so that you've got a more well-rounded description or kind of profile out there of who you are. And also we have had clients create video introductions of themselves as well too, which we think is a great way to, again, kind of highlight, showcase your expertise and experience, and again, get past, those possible gaps on your resume. Step number 3, as part of step number 3 in professional development, one of the things that we really want our clients to do lately these days is to really highlight, focus on, and work on their soft skills as well. So if there's anything that you feel would be important as your industry or the industry that you're looking to get into is innovating and changing, we've had clients, for example, put on their resume, I did a great job with change and crisis management. I was able to move my team from in-person to remote in 5 days, for example. So what are the leadership strengths and skills you have been able to demonstrate during this time of COVID and what was going on at your previous organization? Focusing on those and adding those to your resume as well in LinkedIn is a critically important piece to help kind of sell yourself and brand yourself as well, okay? And as part of this, if you're having trouble identifying what some of your top leadership strengths or skills are, you can use this wheel. This is from Development Dimensions International. It's a very highly regarded management consulting firm. And these are the top leadership skills that they assert are the most important in today's economy. So you could take this, kind of print it out, do a quick quiz for yourself, ask other people how they see your leadership strengths to help you identify what they are so that you can more have a greater understanding of what your leadership strengths are and put that as part of your elevator speech and branding statement too. We want you to also, as part of your professional development and kind of dealing with the emotional side, if you will, of having gaps in your resume, and if you are currently unemployed or furloughed, is we really also want you to practice as much as possible, as much self-care as you can, because your attitude about how you are feeling about yourself and your situation, it really affects your actions, which in turn affects your outcome. So exercise, write out some affirmations, pay attention to your body language and how you're coming across when you're talking with people on the phone, but also obviously on Zoom calls. And if you need to, get an accountability partner, a cheerleader that's going to help you kind of boost your mood during the course of your week, and have regular check-ins with them so that you get into as good of a mental space as you possibly can, despite what else is going on for you. All right, before we get to our last couple of tips here, I did just want to offer everyone, if you need additional advice for your unique situation and would like to learn a little bit more about our coaching services, we would be happy to chat with you. Just email us at admin@halliecrawford.com. We'll get that set up with you, and we'd be happy to share additional advice and tips, but also explain to you how we can help you a little bit more through coaching. All right, let's talk about step number 4. This is networking. We all know networking is really, really critical to tapping into the hidden job market. On the list here on the left-hand side are places that we want you to consider bumping up your networking efforts, not just on LinkedIn, but you may do it a little bit on Facebook. You could check out online meetup groups. Your alumni association is huge. We want you to join and be more active there, because those are warm leads. And Rebecca didn't pay me to say that. We tell all of our clients that. And also check out industry-specific associations if you need to join them or re-engage there too, as well as social groups. We did want to ask everyone, in terms of networking, this last poll here, do you feel like you effectively or really know how to use LinkedIn effectively for your job search? So let's do that last poll here if we could. And we know that most of you are probably already on LinkedIn, which is great, but we want to know if you feel like you really know what you're doing with LinkedIn and networking. So if we could go ahead and do that, Rebecca, that would be fantastic. And then I'm going to pull up this next slide here while we're doing this poll here, because I want you to think about networking effectively and these specific items on this slide, as well as some of your goals too. Okay, so I'll pause for a minute while we're doing this poll. And this gives me a chance to make sure my dog remains silent. I know you all are understanding, but he always likes to bark right during these times. Okay, great. Oh my gosh, look at this. It's even 50-50 split. Okay, so most of you probably feel like, or at least 50% do, how to network more effectively. So for those of you that do already, that's fantastic. What we would encourage you to do is kind of bump it up a little bit and strengthen it even more by joining or participating more proactively in LinkedIn groups, sharing your expertise through articles, etc. And set a goal, and this would be for everyone, even those who don't feel like they are using LinkedIn effectively, to connect with a certain number of people each week. It could be 5, it could be a different number depending on how busy you are and what your either work schedule is, etc. But we want you to connect with, have a goal to set, or have a goal to connect with a certain number of people each week, and be really strategic with each of those people. Okay, leverage your Minnesota, not UGA, apologize for that, LinkedIn alumni group. And when you're networking during COVID, like I said earlier at the beginning, you want to think about it like it's about being consistent and persistent with people. Realize that they may not get back to you right away, and that's part of the deal, but don't take it personally. And realize that networking, it's kind of a law of numbers. It's just like sales, where you reach out to X number of people and you'll get like a 5 or 10% return rate. So just keep that in mind, and don't be offended if people say no or don't respond to you. You want to reach out to as many Minnesota alumni and other people on LinkedIn as you possibly can. As part of networking effectively, it's a great idea to connect with local recruiters on LinkedIn, reach out to hiring managers, expand your network to more than 500 connections, and stay in touch with former coworkers, because we've had clients say, oh, well, one of my coworkers went here or there, and that person was like, hey, why don't you interview here? Or let me tell you a little bit more about it. So don't forget, kind of your own backyard, so to speak, and people who are coworkers with you before in your current or previous jobs, find out where they are and kind of touch base with them for networking purposes as well. And finally, we'll talk about informational interviews for just a moment here, because I want to make sure that we get to, that we have enough time for Q&A. So informational interviews, just briefly, they're a one-on-one conversation with someone who works either in an industry that you'd like to be in, a role that you'd like to be in, or within an organization that you're interested in as well. It could be any of those three criteria, if you will, okay? And what you want to do with your informational interview, kind of the basics, is start with people that you know, friends, family, former coworkers. Tell them that you're looking for information, not a job, so that they'll be more likely to respond to you. And obviously be very professional with them and stay in touch with them over time. Okay, so you set up like a 10 or 15-minute phone call with them to ask them what their organization is looking for in prospective employees, to ask them what it's like to work there, if they know any connections that they could introduce you to. So again, the basic gist of your informational interviews is, how do I put my best foot forward in my search, and getting advice for that versus I'm not going to talk to you about you getting me a job. Okay. And our very last slide here before we get to taking action and then Q&A is, as part of networking, we want you to set a schedule for yourself. So you want to say, for example, I'm going to spend about 10 minutes on Tuesdays and Thursdays participating in my LinkedIn groups, or those are the times that I'm going to reach out or hop on. And I know, Rebecca, you said, and maybe you can say this in just a minute with Q&A too, the Alumni Association groups. I know that a lot of universities have LinkedIn groups too, so maybe you can kind of clarify that in just a moment when we're doing the Q&A. But you want to set a schedule for networking. You want to stay organized and have, for example, like an Excel spreadsheet where you keep track of the connections that you've made, what was said, the person's contact information, all of that. And a couple more things about your job search to start to close us out while you're thinking about your action steps is make sure that for job search purposes, you update your voicemail and make sure it's your voice and not the computerized voice, and that it sounds professional and upbeat. And we also want you to create or have either a job search specific email address, or at the very least, you've got an automatic signature line in your email with your LinkedIn profile and your value proposition, your elevator speech as well, okay? So that anyone can contact you based on the emails that you send them, and it's easy to find, how do I reach you, okay? All right, so let's start to get to the Q&A. Please feel free to begin to share those in the Q&A section. And as you're writing these, please also write down for us 2 action steps that you will take in the next week. There's some examples on the slide here. Informational interviews, review the model, etc. And then we'll go ahead and dive into questions, Rebecca.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for that presentation. I thought it was very helpful for those who are trying to overcome some gaps in their employment, as well as like thinking ahead and making the most of this time.
Yeah, no problem.
We definitely have lots of resources at the University of Minnesota Alumni Association. We have something called the Maroon and Gold Network, which is a career networking platform for students and alumni, and that's absolutely free to join. That's a great place to kind of narrow in and find alumni within different industries of interest or companies. You can also join our LinkedIn group for the University of Minnesota Alumni Association, and that's an opportunity for you to communicate with other alumni. And then we also have a University of Minnesota Alumni Association LinkedIn page, which is where we promote a lot of our upcoming webinars and events and things of that nature. Awesome. All right. Well, I'm curious to know, Haley, about like how much time should someone dedicate to like networking and their job search process? Like, what does that look like? What are some expectations or what are some goals people should set around that?
It's a great question. So it depends obviously too on, if you're currently working or have other things going on. But we never tell anyone, even when they're unemployed, to spend the whole entire day, networking and job searching because you're going to get burned out. What we would recommend is set aside a certain amount of time. For example, if you're a morning person, set aside the time in the morning for 2 hours, give or take, to work on networking, update your resume and LinkedIn if needed, check and respond to LinkedIn messages. And you may say to yourself, okay, I'd like to apply for, 2 or 3 jobs per day or whatever it is. But we always want you to focus more of your time on the talking with people and the networking. So focus more on the networking piece versus, oh, I need to apply to a certain amount of jobs. And I would say, just as a general kind of rule of thumb, if you spent about 4 hours, give or take, every day on your job searching, I honestly feel like that's a pretty reasonable amount. It's going to depend on what's going on. So, for example, if you have an interview coming up, you're going to spend more time during the course of one day preparing for that. But I feel like between 4 and 5 hours is honestly kind of as much as you can reasonably do without getting burned out and done with it for the day.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And you mentioned online courses and things of that nature.
Mhm.
What are some suggested courses or topics people should look for?
Yeah, that's a great one. So I really like classes that are like leadership, strengths, or skills based. I
Mhm.
think that right now, given what's going on, and we're probably going to be working remotely at least partially for a long time, I would
Yeah.
focus on classes that are working more effectively and productively remotely.
Mm.
Like, how do I lead my team more effectively remotely and motivate them? Managing others or working with a team more effectively remotely. So things like that, structuring and time management, because a lot of people are having a hard time with that too and knowing how to
Yeah.
balance things. So those would be really good things for you personally. But look at also, like if there's software that's come out that you just, you've kind of been putting it off and you need to get up to speed on it, certain like hard kind of tangible skills, this is a really good time to work through those too.
Excellent. And I know LinkedIn Learning also has a number of career-related prep options, including like a practice interview module, and there's salary information, and there's like so many different tools and things to check out now on LinkedIn.
Yeah, those are great too. Um, and the only other thing I would say too is, and this may sound kind of funny, but I'm getting a little bit more into YouTube because I have a 13-year-old who's watching it all the time. But you can actually get some really good information by watching YouTube videos online, not just about interview prep, but about like what it's like to work in this other job and what employers might be looking for if you're an engineer. So Google that on YouTube because you'll get some really good advice there as well.
Excellent. All right. Looks like we have one question that came in.
Okay, cool.
All right. The question reads, I left work intentionally because my children needed more help in the void left by their elementary schools during COVID. I continue to not intend to go back to the workforce as my children are not fully back in school. Do you have any advice for how to convey my situation on my resume and LinkedIn during this time?
Great question. So what I would say is like COVID-19, and I would say well, I don't know if caretaker is the exact right word, but working or staying at home, taking care of or homeschooling elementary age kids. Like it's okay to just spit it out and spell it out, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So just say, COVID-19 kind of is the header, so to speak, as if that was like the job description,
Mhm.
and just put what you've been doing underneath there, with the dates, so that again, or just the years even is fine too. But this has been the length of time, and just say this is what you've been doing. Um, working from home or taking care of and homeschooling elementary school, kids to support, their learning. And that's fine. That's completely
Mhm.
acceptable because we're all in that same boat.
Yeah, and I definitely feel like there's a lot of employers out there who definitely have empathy for these sorts of situations and have been hit with it within their own organizations as well.
Yeah, totally. So I would say that that's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, good. Are we good?
Yeah, I think that's the only question we received right now.
Okay, cool.
That brings us to time almost. So thank you so much, Haley, for this great presentation. And we look forward to sending out the recording to everyone who registered for today. I will also send out a survey to gather your feedback as well on this presentation, and also to gather your ideas for future topics that we could possibly host as an alumni association. So thank you so much. And many of the resources that we shared out today that the Alumni Association has will be shared out with you as well in my follow-up email. And then you can see Haley's information on the screen here. And yes, thank you so much everyone for your time and energy. And I hope you have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.